Basically, now they're saying we are going to treat Hong Kong just like we treat China. In 1999, there was a 50-year transitionary rule and law and treaty. 2020 is not 50 years later than 1999. You've seen Hong Kong be treated separately by these tech companies, and now a lot of that's going away. Hope everyone had a great 4th of July. Had a wonderful time celebrating. Unfortunately, right around the same period of time as we were celebrating our independence here, you could also be bemoaning the national security law, which China passed to basically, one more stake in the ground to assert their control over Hong Kong. The reason why that relates to platforms is you now have Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter suspending their review of Hong Kong requests for user data. Basically, countries can request these data reviews from the platform companies because Facebook has zero servers, zero exposure to China. That was a decision by Zuckerberg to say, we're not going to have any of our data. We're not going to have any of our servers in China. He never wanted to cross that line. I give him tremendous props for that. So, Twitter also followed suit. Basically, now they're saying we are going to treat Hong Kong just like we treat China. If China gives us a request to look into these users, we ignore it. And now they're going to do the same thing for Hong Kong, which is because of this national security law, which China just passed right around the past week. We're going to talk about that in a second. But, I thought this was interesting where Apple, which has a huge amount of exposure to China, it's a huge market for them. The tech companies disclose what countries are submitting these kind of user data requests and what percent of them they comply with and don't comply. For Apple, it's over 80% of the user data requests from China did they comply with. Apple did. And that's just because they have so much exposure to the Chinese market. They have to capitulate. They can't put up too much of a fight if the Chinese government wants something from them. The unfortunate thing about this, and actually not a lot of these articles are, this is the BBC, are doing a very good job of explaining this and why this is so devastating and really unprecedented is because when Hong Kong was passed over to from the British to China in 1999, there was a 50-year transitionary rule and law and treaty. 2020 is not 50 years later than 1999. So China made it 21 years into a 50-year agreement to have this peaceful transition, which meant that this treaty provided Hong Kong a certain amount of self-sustainability, of autonomy, of the ability to, elect its own kind of prime minister and govern itself to a certain degree, right? And as we all know, Hong Kong has been a huge financial hub. There's a lot of platform stocks that were listed or are listed in the United States and have now done secondary listings in Hong Kong. You've seen Hong Kong as a financial powerhouse. You've seen Hong Kong be treated separately by these tech companies like Facebook and Twitter, for example. And now a lot of that's going away in terms of Hong Kong's freedom and access to capital, international access to capital, Hong Kong's sovereignty in relation to, say, tech companies and their relationship with tech companies like this Facebook, Twitter policy change here that I'm talking about. And really why this is because this Chinese Hong Kong security law is basically asserting even more control over Hong Kong by China. 29 years accelerated against what was laid out in this treaty. So it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate for, the freedoms of the Hong Kong people and how technology companies, capital markets can relate and access Hong Kong and the people and companies listed there. So it's an unfortunate turn of events. And I think it's just another sign here that you're seeing this decoupling. splinternet. I think TPG, the private equity firm, is calling it. The way they frame it is there aren't just two internets. There's actually a myriad of different internets across the geopolitical landscape. So you have kind of US and China on either ends of that spectrum, but now you're seeing different governments like India. Last episode, we just spoke about India banning 59 Chinese apps. So you're starting to see now this splinternet, a spectrum of splinternets, and Hong Kong now basically falling into the bucket of China. But that means a huge decoupling of tech companies, the apps that can run there, right? India's explanation as to why they banned these apps was they said, well, if we can't run our apps and our tech companies in China, but the Chinese apps and tech companies can run in India, well, that's not fair. And you just brutally murdered 20 of our soldiers in the Himalayan mountains. So, we're going to ban these apps. Kind of makes sense, right? So you're seeing this divide on technology. There's two axes to technology. There is the hardware and telecom infrastructure, as we've seen with the battle of the Huawei versus like Ericsson. There's some of these European Nokia. So you're seeing that from a technology perspective, that splinternet, telecom infrastructure, that hardware that enables connectivity to take place on top of it. The other tranche to that is the software and the data on top of it. So what software companies, TikTok, prime example, or Facebook going into China, for example, what software companies can provide their software that can be used by the users in that country, and then data localization. What are the rules around where that data needs to be stored? And, is it processed? Is it going back into, say, the United States, or is it staying in India, for example? Or Europe has a lot of data localization rules and laws around where the data needs to be stored and kept in GDPR and elsewhere in their policy quagmire that you need to comply with if you're going to operate in Europe. And it's kind of all country by country, not just across all the EU. So these are kind of these two intersecting forces, all just in that technology bucket, that you're starting to see this fragmentation appear, not just US and China, but now you've got India. We're seeing Europe do certain things. I'm sure there'll be other cases cropping up around the world, and we'll be sure to talk about it here. Really unfortunate to see from a kind of just freedom standpoint for this to happen to the Hong Kong folks. Not sure there's much that we can do at this point, but take some reactionary measures as we're seeing these tech companies do. Hi, this is Alex from Winner Take All. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the content. Feel free to leave a comment, ask us questions, and definitely make sure to join us on our next live stream.